Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, we got a few things to go over here today. We're going to deal with some pretty cool footage of Mount Etna. I'll take a couple different little separate clips from this longer video that's out there, and as always, I post everything in the description below so you can actually look at the whole video if you're curious. It's some pretty quite interesting video, and the guy who's doing the narrating actually shows a whole pile of different perspectives. And you get to kind of see different views from where it is, and a lot of what the people are seeing and feeling, and all of the mobilization that's gone from days previous, because they kind of knew something was happening, to where we are right now. We're gonna also deal with this whole premier's meeting and the joke that Carney is to the West. The Federalists, Mo and Daniel Smith, are definitely trying to ease the separatist tensions, but yet Daniel Smith still seems to be holding, at least standing her ground, knowing that her listed demands has to be met in order for anything to be built. But I don't think she's really come to the realization yet about the idea of what decarbonization is, and how that's going to affect the actual idea of pipelines. And everybody seems to be avoiding the one real answer to the most significant reason on why we need to get our oil and gas to market. And it's, yes, profit, yes, our economy, yes, our healthcare, yes, our schools, yes. But it ends this entire green narrative, because the second we start pushing more of our, especially our natural gas, we start reducing GHG emissions more than anything else Canada could possibly do. One pipeline, if we can get 1 million barrels a day moving, we can do more than decarbonizing half of Canada, and we can do it quicker. So this whole decarbonization thing that Carney keeps slipping over, oh, I'm in for pipelines and it's going to be a decarbonized thing, and we're going to, pipeline here, decarbonize, and and a pipeline here, decarbonize. So in other words, it's a whole bunch of horse pucky. We'll deal with that. We're also going to get into Modi not coming to the G7, because Carney is it's the same Liberal Party. Some footage coming out about the King and his visit to Canada. And, you got to hear what they're saying on the other side of the world. Pretty hilarious. We're also going to do a little thing about the bureaucracy. Rebel had the Taxpayers Federation, Franco the Magnificent, on to describe just the obesity of our government, and the numbers are going to blow you away. We have a little bit about Corey Morgan talking about Saskatchewan and our ideas of leaving as well, and talking about some future meetings that are coming up. We got some wicked video of another jewelry heist and a few other things to go over if time permits. So without further ado, let's just get started on this Mount Etna. This is some pretty wild footage. It ends up showing the actual blast in real time a little bit later, but we'll just start off where this video starts. See all the people running?
Mount Etna erupted powerfully on June 2, 2025, casting thick clouds of ash and smoke high into the Sicilian sky, startling early morning hikers and sending a dramatic warning from one of the world's most active volcanoes.
Aspetta che c'ho anche gli ospiti,
Ma che roba?
The eruption began in the pre-dawn hours, with deep rumbles felt across the surrounding villages, followed by fiery explosions bursting from the southeast crater, painting the sky in glowing shades of red, orange, and gray.
I like it. They kind of turn and they start moving a little bit faster, moving a little bit faster. Okay, now they're running. Look at this, real time.
Residents of Catania and nearby towns watched in awe as volcanic tremors shook windows and the unmistakable scent of sulfur drifted through the air. As the morning progressed, lava fountains reached remarkable heights, and a dense plume of ash surged skyward, eventually climbing to more than 6 kilometers above sea level. The ground near the summit cracked and hissed as hot gases escaped under intense pressure. A swift pyroclastic flow, a racing mass of superheated ash and gas, spilled down the crater's northern flank, vanishing into the Valley del Leon, a deep natural basin carved by centuries of eruptions. Though no communities lie directly in its path, the sudden appearance of the flow caused concern among nearby observers, many of whom had to be escorted away for safety.
I'm going to scroll ahead just a little wee bit here. Watch this. Wow, you're not outrunning that.
Despite the ash plume disrupting air quality in the upper atmosphere, nearby airports remained operational, although flight paths were adjusted as a precaution. Visibility across the region fluctuated throughout the day as winds carried fine volcanic dust over surrounding towns and the Ionian coast. Schools and outdoor events were temporarily suspended, and citizens were advised to wear masks or stay indoors due to the fine ash particles descending over rooftops, vehicles, and gardens.
Pretty wild. That's a lot of power. Mother Earth, crazy power. So yeah, like I said, they have some great footage on this particular video that I picked. So yeah, feel free, please. Like I say, I put everything in the description below. Now, we have some great news that happened. And I am just going to let him spill the beans.
So the first breaking news for you from me for this parliamentary session is that a Conservative motion requiring an accounting of Canada's finances, with Mark Carney having to produce a budget this spring. Now, Prime Minister Carney said he wasn't going to produce a budget at all this year, then said he would do it this fall. And then he tabled a bill with $500 billion in spending. Now, this is extraordinary. He said he was going to cap increases to government spending at 2%. This is an 8% increase. It also sees massive increases to consultants outside of government. I want you to think Arrive scam when we talk about consultants. So we need accountability. We need to see what's happening with this $500 billion. Is this more inflationary spending? And is that why the Carney Liberals don't want it scrutinized by parliamentary committees and by members of parliament from all parties? So this is a big win, and it's important. This is an important test for the new Prime Minister because he doesn't have a majority. So will he meet the deadline and get this budget in front of parliamentarians this spring? Well, stay tuned. We're just getting started.
Right on.
So
well done. That's good old Michael Barrett. Yeah, great parliamentarian. Okay, so let's just move into this. I'm going to skip right over Dougie. He doesn't really say anything of importance, other than he just blows crap out his mouth all the time. So we're just going to move on to who I'm seeing as really the three most important people involved in this whole unity crisis. And we're going to start off with Danielle Smith.
I trust everyone's rooting for the Oilers. Go team.
Go Oilers.
Listen.
Do you think you're going to get the language in the communique today that can help you get product to the Pacific Coast?
I hope so. I mean, I think that there seems to be an appetite to talk about getting pipelines built so that we can get oil and gas to market. The problem is, unless we address the 9 terrible policies that have damaged investor confidence, we're not going to get the proponents coming forward with major investments. So I think it's got to be a 2-track process. Let's get the commitment that we are going to build a new pipeline, and then I'll have to work with the Prime Minister to make sure that we can repeal or significantly amend the policies.
In the absence of a project to fast track, does that satisfy your demands while you work on the other things? I know you've got the 9 policies. That's going to take more time than I think one meeting in Saskatoon to see movement there. So would language today of a willingness to fast track an energy corridor to northern British Columbia, does that satisfy you?
Having an energy corridor to northern British Columbia that includes a bitumen pipeline would be a good first step in the communique. Understanding that we won't get a serious proponent from the private sector unless we address those underlying conditions. It's the reason why the federal government had to step in the first time when there were no proponents willing to take forward Trans Mountain. If we're going to continue building pipelines, we have to change the environment. And I've made that point very clear to the Prime Minister, and I'm looking forward to working with him and his energy minister to see how quickly we can address those underlying factors.
West to east pipeline, and what's your message to Quebec?
I would say that the most, we have a lot of collaboration at our Western Premier's table. You may have seen that our west to east proposal was from the Northwest BC coast, probably Prince Rupert, to Hudson Bay, which is Churchill. And I think if we can do that and get icebreakers, then we would be able to bring ships up and over and be able to feed those East Coast refineries and also be able to get onto Europe. I'm interested in working with partners who want to work with me. And I think what I've heard, and you heard from the Premier before me, that he's quite interested in seeing Churchill work.
You don't see a pipeline project going through Quebec, so you abandon that?
I'd like them all. I'd like them all, but I've got to work with where I think we're going to have the most success. And where I think we'll have the most success right now is working on a corridor between Hudson Bay and Port of Prince Rupert. And I hope that we can get some common ground on that.
Premier, why tie Alberta right now? Because here in Saskatchewan, we know that they're mostly man-made.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's worth bringing up at a federal level, maybe with Parks Canada, having an agreement to hopefully curb some of these preventable wildfires?
Yeah. We found last year that we had 67% of fires were human caused. We did a major campaign, an awareness campaign. We were able to reduce that to 57%. And so I think that those awareness campaigns are important. So I would hope that the federal government would maybe assist in getting other provinces to do the same. Maybe other provinces can look at what we are doing. But the wind has dramatically changed our situation in Alberta. We were able to provide resources to other communities. We've had to call them home. We went from having about 9,000 hectares burned last week to over 400,000 now. We've got nearly 5,000 people evacuated. We are about to restart our Emergency Management Committee of Cabinet because this is an indicator with so many communities facing evacuation that we've got to be able to respond in a way that is going to be rapid. So we're facing very similar conditions now to Manitoba and Saskatchewan once again for the 3rd year in a row.
Why tie the issue of getting a commitment for an oil pipeline to national unity?
Well, you have to understand just how damaged Alberta is by the fact that we didn't get pipelines built. If we had built Northern Gateway, if we'd built Keystone and we'd built Energy East, we'd have 2.5 million barrels more per day of production, which is $55 billion a year worth of GDP value, which is worth $17 billion to my government alone, and about an equal amount to the federal government. So this is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada. Any of the projects that you will see on the ultimate list, I will tell you that a bitumen pipeline will be by far the greatest benefit to all of Canada. That's why we're going to continue to push for it, because it's a good project. It's good for our country. There's $9 trillion worth of value in discoverable and achievable reserves right now. And so why would you leave that in the ground? No other country in the world would, and we shouldn't either.
That's all the time we have for questions,
Okay,
guys. You have to
thanks.
get on to the meeting.
Okay, now
Bonjour. Avez-vous des questions? Vous voulez que je vous parle?
God, he's such an idiot. Anyways, most of it's in French. I'm just going to skip ahead to the little wee bit he does in English, and then he goes on to Scott Moe.
What is the appetite? What is the appetite for pipelines through Quebec, Premier? Premier, what is the appetite for pipelines through Quebec? I understand what you're saying. You'll examine those areas, but what is the appetite for pipelines? What is the willingness of Quebecers to have a pipeline through the province?
I didn't see the project, if there's one. So we need to see what's the economic impact for Quebec, what is the impact on the environment. So what I say is that if there's a project going through Quebec, we'll study it. That's all what I said.
You'd be surprised how fast, if we cut the money off, they start drilling for oil. The West has got to leave. The West has got to go. Canada go bankrupt, and they keep lying. If the East wants to keep on gaslighting Canadians with their propaganda, saying that Alberta, they don't pay the most, and then they lie about the numbers about the equalization and all the rest. That if you're not really concerned, then let us go. Just let the West go, and we'll see just how long you guys last, because you won't. In fact, the first province that's going to go tits up in a handbasket are these guys. These people right here, the welfare province, sucking Canada dry. It's embarrassing. This country's become the laughing stock of not only Canada, but a lot of other places around the world that pay attention to what's going on in Canada, see this, and it's an embarrassment. And I found a lot of different videos from all different places around the world where they actually bring this up and use it as what a horrible example of the equalization programs are. So whenever they're talking about it within their own countries, they always go, wow, look at Canada. Boy, do they ever get raked over the coals because of that one province. Mooches, the welfare state, the welfare province.
What about the larger idea that Danielle Smith has come here with a list of conditions she would like the federal government to meet in terms of rolling back federal environmental legislation and approving oil corridors through other provinces? How far do you think the premiers and the prime minister at this meeting are willing to go to sort of satisfy some of those concerns in building a consensus in the sake of national unity, as she puts it?
Okay. First, I've been invited here by Mr. Carney, not by Danielle or whoever. Second, he asked us to bring economic projects. So we have many economic projects in electricity, in critical minerals. So we'll see with Mark Carney what is he ready to finance or to help or to push. But I first need to see
the money.
What are the projects, including the one of Danielle.
You need to see the money.
Pas du tout. Pas du tout. Pas du tout.
What a waste of skin.
C'est important.
Yeah, get off the stage.
Hello, everyone. I just take a minute to welcome Prime Minister Carney and all of the premiers to Saskatchewan for the First Ministers meeting in 40 years, first since 1985 in our province, and we're very fortunate to have that offer from the Prime Minister, and very fortunate to host all of the premiers here yet again. I would say that I look forward to today's meetings on behalf of not only the residents in Saskatchewan, but on behalf of Canadians. We've been very clear in our support in this province of doing our part to ensure that Canada does achieve the aspirational target that the Prime Minister has put forward of becoming the strongest economy in the G7, and very much support the Prime Minister's target of ensuring that Canada can become a global energy superpower.
Now, those are the exact same promises that Governor Turd has been saying for the past 9 and some years. Nothing's changed. It's the same party.
And that means all forms of energy do need to not only have a regulatory environment where they can be produced, but all forms of energy then also would have access to the world. And I think you'll see premiers working collaboratively on achieving just that. We've been very clear as well, we need to see some regulatory shift in order for that to happen over the long term. In the short term, we look forward to prioritizing a number of projects from coast to coast to coast to ensure that we can start that work as Canadians to become that global energy superpower and to increase the opportunities that we have economically to ensure that we are strong and stable and independent nation for decades into the future. In the longer term, that regulatory environment will have to change. I think that's evident by the fact that we are looking as Canadians to enact legislation that would actually circumvent the current environment that we have, and we most certainly look forward to that work as well. A point of collaboration that I would just point out where premiers are already working together on creating that access to Asian and European markets was the support by all, not only Western premiers, but Arctic premiers in creating a port-to-port corridor between the Churchill area or the Hudson Bay area and the Northwest ports on the Pacific coast. And that would be absolutely imperative and an opportunity, I think, for not only those in Western Canada, but for all Canadians to access those Asian and European markets. And that I would provide as an example of how premiers are already starting this work in doing our level best to ensure that we are contributing as 13 subnational governments, 13 subnational economies, contributing to those goals that the Prime Minister has of Canada becoming the strongest economy in the G7 nations and Canada becoming a global energy superpower. So thank you.
Do you expect the federal government to come forward with funding and money for whichever projects they choose?
Well, I think there's two conversations to have. One is around the regulatory environment that is there for private investment to happen. For example, we have 3 uranium mines in Saskatchewan that are working their way through the regulatory process. One of them actually has all provincial approvals and has for 2 years, and it's just recently received all of the federal approvals as well. And so we'd like to see that project move forward as early as this spring to start with their likely in excess of $1 billion of construction, thereby enhancing the economy in the very, very immediate term and ensuring a strong economy for years into the future by providing that low carbon energy source for other Canadians and for other markets around the world. So the first piece is the regulatory piece to attract that private investment. The second piece is often less about regulation, but sometimes regulation is involved, but is in public infrastructure. And I think that is almost a separate conversation with respect to how we are going to join as a provincial government with the federal government and oftentimes municipalities on publicly funded infrastructure that is going to provide the services that, at the end of the day, Canadians expect their governments to work together on. So there's two conversations there.
But that's a yes, right? For some of these nation-building projects that the federal government's going to choose today, you're going to expect or need federal money and funding support for that.
Yeah, our focus is actually on the private investment that we can attract. If we are truly going to achieve the target of being a global energy superpower and increase our economy to a level where it's the strongest in the G7 nations, that's going to take private investment. We aren't going to do that with public investment only. However, there will be public investment that is necessary in order to support Canadians and support our communities that we live in and support, yes, the private investment that is arriving. And so two separate conversations. The first has to be fast-tracking a number of projects, as well as having a longer look at how do we correct the regulatory process that we have to provide certainty for investment in all of the industries that are creating wealth and jobs for not only Saskatchewan people, but for Canadians across the country.
But Premier, there's a collision here between the industrial agenda and a climate agenda as well, right? A lot of Canadians voted for the environmental and emissions policies of the Liberal government, and you and Premier Smith and others have suggested a lot of these things need to be scrapped to allow for the industrial agenda to move ahead. So how do you reconcile those things while we're here in a province under a state of emergency because of wildfires, which climate change now played a role in?
With an understanding that by developing Canadian products, and I will speak to Saskatchewan products, but by developing Canadian products, we actually are doing right not only by our Canadian economy and by Canadians in creating jobs in our communities, but we certainly are doing right by the environment as well, in particular when it comes to from a climate change perspective. In Saskatchewan, whether it be agri-food products, whether it be the oil and gas we produce or the potash we produce or the uranium, they're the cleanest products that you can find on Earth. Our ag products are some 65% lower in their carbon emissions on a net per ton basis than the next 7 largest producers around the world. When you get the pulses, it's much larger than that. Our potash produced in this province has half the carbon content on a per ton basis than the next largest producers, which are Russia and Belarus. And I would say there's maybe some ethical concerns with purchasing products from those countries as well. We all know what uranium is used for, as it is refined in Ontario and provided to Canadians and all other markets around the world as well. And when it comes to oil and gas, I said this yesterday. Out on the western side in the heavy oil play between North Battleford and Lloydminster, companies like Cenovus and Strathcona are literally making billions of dollars in investments, not just in production gains, but in environmental gains in carbon, lowering the carbon content per barrel of oil they're producing. The methane emissions in that particular oil field have reduced since 2015 some 65%. I would ask anyone here today to name me another global industry that has lowered their methane emissions some 65% since 2015. It's really an incredible record. Down in the southern oil field that we have in Saskatchewan, we have net zero oil companies that are operating there using carbon capture and enhanced oil recovery. Really a strong environmental story on Canadian produced products, and I would say that we would be doing right, and not only by Canadians and our Canadian economy, but doing right by the global challenge that we all face in global climate change by producing and allowing the world to access more of those sustainable products that are produced right here in Saskatchewan, but there's equal products right across Canada that I say would deserve the same respect.
Can you talk a little bit about the change in tone in these meetings, whether or not you've met with Prime Minister Trudeau, you're now meeting with Prime Minister Carney? What is the difference in tone, and are you more hopeful this time in terms of Western alienation that your concerns are being met?
Yes, I am, and the words that I'm hearing from the Prime Minister I think are encouraging, and I would say I would hope are encouraging for all Canadians. When I hear the Prime Minister talk about becoming the strongest economy in the G7 nation, when I hear Prime Minister Carney talk about doing what he can to ensure that Canada becomes a global energy superpower, that is going to take some change. Policies do matter, and I think that's proved out in Saskatchewan over the last decade or decade and a half with the mining investments that we've been able to attract. But policies do matter, and so we are going to need a shift in policies in order for that to happen. And so I think all Canadians and myself are very encouraged by what Prime Minister Carney has said. We will now have to do some work, and we're willing to work alongside the federal government in ensuring that work happens to follow those words with action. And that's what needs to happen now. Thank you.
Good morning, folks.
Okay, and I think Canoe was, I think he did a
community.
few rails or something before he got on there, because he was pretty happy and all over the place, and he just talks irrelevant anyways. So now let's just move on to the G7, and actually let's just start with this first.
So the big developments we are tracking for you. Prime Minister Narendra Modi unlikely to attend the G7 summit. These are the big details coming in through our sources. Remember, ties with Canada currently remain strained, although there has been a phone call between S. Jaishankar of India and his counterpart, the Canadian Foreign Minister. But of course, action is expected from India before ties will improve, before relations will improve between the two countries. Remember, although Mark Carney has now taken over, it is a new dispensation, unlike the previous one of Justin Trudeau. However, India, of course, still waits for credible action before we improve our relations, before once again relations go back to what they were before, of course, this chill in ties. Siddharth Rege is joining us with the very latest on this story. Siddharth, what are your sources telling you? Is Prime Minister Narendra Modi likely to skip attending the G7 summit physically?
Absolutely, Uday. What we are learning is that for the first time in 6 years, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is expected to miss the G7 summit. This is a key message that is being sent to Canada we know that the dispensation is not with Trudeau anymore. Mark Carney has taken over. There were talks that were held between Anita Anand and the Indian External Affairs Minister as well. But still, we've not seen any action on the ground, and that is why what we are learning is that, as per sources, the Prime Minister is likely to skip the G7 summit in Canada for the first time in 6 years. Madhav Nalapat, 2177.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, I believe, is back with us now on the broadcast, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Professor Nalapat, if you're able to hear me, your first reaction to this news coming in and this decision taken by India and Prime Minister Modi?
Well, I frankly think the Prime Minister has lost almost nothing. The G7 has lost its relevance with the start of the G20. And in the G20, as you know, India plays a very prominent role. So quite frankly, not much is lost, if at all anything is lost, by skipping this summit. I think the G7 now has become superfluous because the G20 has basically overtaken it. And as a consequence, the Prime Minister skipping it will be of very little consequence to India or to Indian diplomacy or to Indian interests.
Professor Nalapat, thank you for joining us with your perspective on that story.
What he's saying, especially after what Trudeau has done with the relations and how irrelevant Trudeau has made us. He's insulted us. So, we might as well just go to the G20 and sit in the corner like the, idiot dunce country, especially since we re-elected the same party again. There's going to be no difference. It's going to be the same thing. He can talk his talk, but it's all the same. Same policies, all the same ministers, a few new faces. It's all the same. Now, let's just move on to just what is going on in the G7 with the security operations.
With less than 2 weeks to go before the G7 Leaders Summit, police are now outlining the scope of the security operations planned to keep people safe. Here's Jacqueline Wilson with the detail.
From those with their hooves on the ground to an eye in the sky, an assortment of teams will be working to keep people safe during the G7 summit in Kananaskis, June 15th to 17th.
I know Calgary is prepared. If we have to manage something that becomes unlawful, we're prepared to do that.
Hall calling it a massively complex undertaking that brings together personnel from various police agencies and the Army. A large zone around Kananaskis will be closed to the public, and there will be a massive no-fly zone. In Calgary, several roads around the airport will also be closed to keep leaders and accompanying personnel safe. Calgary will be home to 3 designated demonstration zones with live streams airing at the summit.
The reason we do that is because we're restricting access to Kananaskis. So people who want to express themselves, as is their right, they can't get close to the leaders. So the leaders won't see and hear the protest. And so by establishing that video link, we are helping facilitate that charter access.
Police are preparing for mass arrests if needed, and they're asking for the public's help to notify them of anything worrisome.
If somebody hears something that concerns them, whether it's about, I think somebody's coming to protest, or I saw something suspicious, we need to hear that. And so I think that's the real ask to the community is, if you're concerned, we're going to be concerned, so let us know.
Police won't share details for security reasons, but are currently running rehearsals for various trauma scenarios, from wildfire evacuations to assassination attempts. Jacqueline Wilson, CTV News, Calgary.
Yeah, it's going to cost us a pile of money. Now, I absolutely love this clip where these two discuss the disaster of a king. Charles gets slammed for his impotent message to President Trump.
Now, Rowan, the king, Donald Trump refused to take the king's subtle no for an answer. Just hours after that speech said, by the way, Canada has a choice. You pay the US government $61 billion to be protected by America's new Golden Dome missile defense, or you become America's 51st state. Where do you think this debate is going?
Andrew, I've long warned that King Charles will spell the end of the monarchy. He could even spell the end of the Commonwealth. He is such a disaster as a king. I'm sorry, I'm a constitutional monarchist by heart, but this bloke is doing such damage to everything, all the constitutional monarchies around the world. Part of his speech, yes, okay, he tried to tick off Donald Trump, but part of his speech was basically a welcome to country type thing, a Canadian version thereof, in which he was saying, Canada's unceded land by the such and such a tribe. He's going to come to Australia and he'll do the same thing. You watch. Albanese will drag him out here and he'll stand. Well, he's already done it once almost. He'll stand there and he'll say that this is, unceded land. And I'm sorry, if the monarch, the constitutional head of our constitutional monarchy, says that this isn't kosher, if you like, our land, then we are saying that our laws do not apply, our laws are not valid, our property rights are not valid. The damage this bloke is doing is unfathomable. And what he said there, seriously, if I were a Canadian, I'd be going, you bet I want to be the 51st state, because the alternative is being in this kind of no man's land where we don't belong to anything because the property belongs to the Algonquin tribe or whatever. And let me say, maybe Australia should be looking at being the 52nd state, because this is where we're going with this endless tearing down of the very fabric, the very foundations of what was our colonial Commonwealth. And unless we wake up, we're going to be in the same problem.
I've got it, but Rowan, I don't understand why, if he says, and he said this is unceded land, why in the same speech does he keep calling himself the king of it? I mean, seriously.
Well, he can't be, and that's the point. He can't be. The guy's not very bright. He's not very bright. But the damage he's doing is incalculable. And seriously,
we'll see.
No, that's my opinion.
And now there's hundreds of these. It's laughing at Canada, laughing at the whole thing, especially the unceded, and they go off about these. It's just an insult to not only the Indigenous, well, to people who actually understand, Indigenous who actually understand and have read the treaties and realize what makes Canada, and then, of course, you get the wokeists, right? The people who like to be under the thumb of the federal government, who think that for some reason they're the savior and vote Liberal or NDP. If you vote Liberal or NDP and you're Indigenous, I mean, you're going against every single aspect of your of everything of what it is to be Indigenous. So it's quite funny. I had to get a kick out of it. I laugh every time somebody says it's the unceded land of whatever. Like, I'm getting anything. Like, you're sending me checks. I own this land. Like, is there something to it? Are there where's the Indian Parliament? I don't see it. Okay, whatever. Quite hilarious. We're just mocked all over the world. Nothing's changed. Now we're gonna move on. This is really interesting. This is all Rebel, Ezra, of course. Great outlet. If you don't know who they are, watch and follow these people. They're on the ball. They report on everything. They are a broader spectrum of Canada than any other outlet there is. And yeah, you may, CTV and CBC and Global, they may say, they put a Manitoba behind their name. They're all the exact same. Whereas these people actually have and deal with provinces individually and tackle the tough questions of each area. And it doesn't matter where you are in Canada, you have representation within Rebel, even Quebec. So anyways, this is a great interview, and of course it has got the amazing one and only Franco Terrazino. This guy is, like, Canadian Taxpayers Federation is an awesome, just top-notch group of people looking out for your best interests.
The headline: bureaucracy balloons by 99,000 employees over 10 years. That's a city's worth of employees. If you're wondering why it's so hard to make ends meet, it's because you're carrying another 100,000 people on your back. Joining us now via Skype is our friend Franco Terrazino. Franco, great to see you again.
Hey, Ezra, thanks for having me on.
Do you know the total number of federal civil servants? And by the way, Why would I limit it to Fed? There's provincial government, there's municipal government, there's so many different people who are not helping to pull the wagon. They're in the wagon while the rest of us push it. Give us 99,000, that's huge.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, like there's now more than 357,000 federal government bureaucrats. And you're right, it's not just the federal level, right? You got the provincial government bureaucrats, the municipal government bureaucrats. It's really a story of the taxpayers versus the tax consumers, right? The makers versus the takers. But if you look at the federal level, I mean, the bureaucracy has absolutely ballooned over the last decade. There are now 99,000 more federal bureaucrats today than what there was in 2016. And Ezra, I don't remember hearing about some bureaucrat shortage in Ottawa all the way back 10 years ago. And it's not just the number of bureaucrats that are increasing. Taxpayers are also paying for a bigger bureaucracy, taking bigger paychecks, right? So the number of bureaucrats has gone up 38% in a decade, but the cost of the bureaucracy has gone up 73% since 2016.
You know, I didn't realize what a large percentage that was. So if you're saying it's increased by 99,000, and if it's 357,000 today, that means that 10 years ago, and you correct my math, maybe I'm doing this wrong, there was just over 250,000 10 years ago, 258,000. So that is such a huge increase. It's not like a 5% or a 10% increase. What's 99 over 258? That's got to be close to a 50% increase. We have not received 50% more in services or 50% better services. Like, what are they actually doing? How can you add 100,000 people and everything seems to be worse? The service, like every aspect of government, other than tax collection, that they're doing very well.
Well, yeah, you know, they're supposed to be public servants, but who is really serving who right now? You know what I mean? And look, there are 7 federal departments that more than doubled in 10 years. Okay, let me just list some of these numbers off here. Infrastructure Canada saw a 375% increase in its number of bureaucrats in less than a decade, right? 375% increase. Women and Gender Equality Canada, 334% increase. So there are 7 departments that have doubled or more than doubled in the number of bureaucrats over the last 10 years.
Now, I just kind of, I'm just going to rewind this, okay? Now, we're going to go over this list, okay? So, infrastructure, 375%. Have your roads got better? Has your infrastructure got better or worse in the last 10 years? Women and gender equality in Canada. Crimes against women are at all-time highs. RCMP External Review Committee. We have protesters on the streets yelling for the elimination of certain religions. We have crime that is rampant on the streets. Has that done anything? How about Elections Canada? Are you happy with the way the election turned out? Do you actually think that the media and just the entire construct has done justice for Canada and its citizens? How about immigration and the refugee board? 158% increase. Are you happy with over 1 million immigrants coming in every single year? I'm talking way over 1 million immigrants. Has that helped us in any way? How about the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada? Are our prices within the affordability of what we make? Is our economy booming? Is our dollar value worth more than it was when Trudeau took over? We were par when Trudeau took over, and now we're pesos. How about the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada? Have they done any justice other than completely decimate every single industry across this nation? Companies are fleeing or folding. So just that list is, you would think that there should be minuses in front of those because they have failed so poorly. And the craziest thing is, if you look at the highest numbers on that list, you could actually break it down from worst to least. Literally, you could take it from worst to least in the productivity and how well they've done. This is an absolute abomination. And your taxes are going up and are going to keep going up to pay for this bureaucracy. It's a joke, just like the Liberal NDP.
334% increase. So there are 7 departments that have doubled or more than doubled in the number of bureaucrats over the last 10 years. And as I mentioned, Ezra, it's not just the number that is going up, right? It's also the pay, the bonuses, the perks. So the average compensation, when you look at salary, bonuses, pensions, other types of perks, the average compensation for a federal bureaucrat is now $125,000 a year.
Yeah. You know, I'm looking at your press release here, bureaucracy balloons by 99,000 employees over 10 years, and you've got those bullet points. Infrastructure Canada, up 375%. And I'm just thinking, you know, a lot of infrastructure, when I think infrastructure, I think ports or highways or overpasses, stuff like that. A lot of those are funded by multiple levels of government. You have the city, the province, the feds sometimes. Really, when I think of federal infrastructure, it's they're not involved in everything. I'm trying to think, why would they need to nearly quadruple the number of bureaucrats at Infrastructure Canada? Like, I don't know what they're doing, but I mean, I live in Toronto, which is a dilapidated city falling apart. What infrastructure are they talking about? Are we getting 375% better infrastructure in this country because we got 375% more bureaucrats in infrastructure?
No, I mean, but that's the whole story across government, right? Where you're seeing the cost of government go up, you're seeing the size of government go up, but yet taxpayers are not getting better quality services. I mean, like, here's the other startling point here. So, okay, let me talk about the taxpayer-funded bonuses, because I know your listeners, your audience will know of the CBC bonuses, right, that they've been dishing out year after year after year. Well, all of that is also happening across the federal departments as well. So the federal bureaucrats have taken $1.5 billion in taxpayer-funded bonuses since 2015. Well, you might be asking, well, how are they doing? Well, the results are in, and the performance is poor. So look, these federal departments are failing to meet half of their own performance targets every single year. They can barely meet half of their own performance targets. And like, think about it, folks. Like, these aren't performance targets written by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. This is their own performance targets. It's like they wrote their own tests, and yet they can barely squeak past a D-.
Well said, Franco. And he's bang on the money. And like I said, go over the list. I mean, well, like, look at Dougie. Dougie just gave themselves a 35% raise. Dougie Ford, the Liberal, 35% raise. How about you concentrate on, you know, what you're supposed to do? Your citizens. Maybe once they get a 35% raise, you can give yourself a raise. It's everything's backwards, and it's just getting worse and worse. It's unbelievable how broken our nation is. Now, this is Corey Morgan, and I'm going to play a little bit of his clip here. He's huge on the independence issue. He's been talking about it for decades. He knows his crap. And he goes and does an actual entire video, and as always, I post all the videos in their entirety in the clips below, or in my description below. So let's take a listen to what he has to say about the Saskatchewan independence movement.
So tomorrow, at least from the posting of this video, which will be Monday, June 2nd, I'm going to an emergency town hall, independence town hall meeting in Regina, Saskatchewan to speak there.
Now, I was hoping to go to that, and just the way things ended up going, I could not make it. But I am going to, there are a lot more coming up. I am going to try and make it to a few if I can. And I'm hoping that I can get my gear set up and even do a live stream of one. I think it's important that not only I get out there and start talking to a lot of the people as well. It's very hard, especially like with what I do. It takes hours upon hours in order to make these clips. So it's very hard for me to be able to literally like pull away for a day or two and still be able to keep up with just the standardization of a minimum one show per day type thing and all of the homework I need to do, because I'm usually doing 3 or 4 episodes, at a time. So even though I may record one, I've always got 1 or 2 in the back burner. And then of course I usually have my long form, the ones where I do a lot of in-depth, like I've done on the hydro dams, a lot of the stuff that I broke about Carney, and again, some of the stuff that I feed off of other journalists like Sam Cooper, where I use a lot of their information and then end up kind of breaking my own stories through it. So it's kind of a hard thing to do, but I am going to try it. But if any of you viewers out there do end up going, please, my email address is it's right there. It's CanadianCitizenJournal@gmail.com. You can get in touch with me, and we'll work it out and send me the footage. I'll give you credit for it. Like without, hey man, if you're doing the work, I'd love to be able to give you credit for it, and we'll get that stuff on the air. And maybe even if we know that you're going, we can try and line it up so we can get my viewing audience to throw a few questions that they may, like to hear. We'll see. Like, hey, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. The more people we get, the further out this audience will become. And of course, we can break the propaganda bubble and actually get the truth out, the truth and the facts. Sorry, just the facts.
It's a Rebel Media event. They put a few of those on in Alberta, a couple I went to, and packed the house. And I'm pretty excited about it because Saskatchewan has been overshadowed way too much as independence movements have been rising in Western Canada. And people are forgetting that actually the sentiment for provincial independence in Saskatchewan is as strong as it is in Alberta. And there's people hard at work for it, and for much of the same reasons. Saskatchewan's different, so they've got a lot of parallels and similarities to what's going on in Alberta, but they got some differences too. So that's part of what I'm looking forward to as well. I won't be just speaking to people out there. I'm going to do a lot of listening. I'm looking forward to talking to some people, finding out where they're coming from on this. I mean, they don't necessarily need somebody else coming from out of province to tell them what to do. That's not what I'm out to do. I want to talk more about, the mechanisms and the means of getting towards independence. But as for their individual reasons, it'll be interesting to speak to people about it. I mean, they have the same sort of things with Alberta, a resource-based economy. They're currently being bled for equalization to keep feeding Quebec, as Alberta is. They've got a lot of other resources Alberta doesn't even have. Uranium, potash, things that the world wants, and things that the central federal government just doesn't make any easier to produce. And they've got a lot of oil and gas in Saskatchewan too, of course, and just a skilled, educated workforce. So it's going to be a good meeting. Now, they've been trying, and we're seeing similar battles. It's funny when you see the left in Alberta, the left in Saskatchewan, the status quo people, the ones who are married to the system. The first thing they want to do is take away the ability to pursue independence, not try to reason with independent supporters, not tell us why to stay, but they want to make sure you can't even do it. So Nadine Ness, she's an activist out there in Saskatchewan with...
Now, I've brought her up in previous episodes. She's doing wonders. She's got a whole pile of different town halls on this topic. She's one of them that I definitely want to be able to go to. I'd actually really like to meet her as well. I've been a fan of hers for some time, a few years. I got to know her most through the Wuhan scam. She's quite intelligent. She's got a heck of a resume, and she's just really honest, and she's just a loving Canadian. She just wants what's best for everybody. And if the federal government, and we can't get ahead, and we're watching Canada completely change and go against the morality, the dignity, the pride, and the work ethic, what it is to be Canadian, call it old stock or whatever you want to call it, then if they want to leave and create a new post-national state, that's fine. Then we're going to have to get together and remove ourselves from that in order to save the persona of who we really are. And like I said, it has a lot to do with the just the roots of goodness of what a Canadian is. And so I'm going to try and make it to one of hers for sure. I'm like, hell or high water, I'm going to try everything I can to get to one of hers. But I would love to be able to hit Rebels as well. I've ran across a few of the Rebel reporters in the past. Not that I necessarily interacted with them, but watching them work their magic and ask their questions, and just how qualified they are. I would love, and of course reporting on a lot of the stuff they do. I know that their town halls would be, they would be highly educational and very well functioning, and they always seem to be able to get very good guests and people involved. So again, I'd like to see one of them as well, and I'm going to try to do it. And like I said, if you have the ability to go to them, please email me. I would love to hear from you and share the footage. Let's move on a little bit more.
Unified Grassroots has been working on an independence referendum petition, or in Saskatchewan it would be a plebiscite. And the NDP out there have been screaming and howling at Premier Scott Moe, saying, you've got to shut this down. You can't have that. Why do they fear even giving people the chance to vote on it? I mean, in the same breath, they'll always say there's no real support for it. Well, then you got nothing to worry about, do you?
It's because they fear democracy.
But it would seem to me they do have a lot to worry about. There is something happening. History is happening in the West. It's happening in Canada. Canada's broken, centralized system is falling apart. The outlying provinces have had enough. They're realizing the futility of trying to change within a system that's permanently broken and made slanted to feed central Canada as if it was a funnel draining resources. So Saskatchewan is on the move. And Scott Moe has been very outspoken as a premier too. He's been sounding very similar to Premier Daniel Smith on these things, with kind of taking that middle of the road thing, saying, I'm not a supporter of Saskatchewan secession, but I won't stop people from having a vote on it. One of the steps that Saskatchewan has to do, though, is they should fix up their legislation. Boy, I should have written it down. I believe it's 125,000 votes they need on a petition, maybe 150,000. But it's not like Alberta's legislation either, in that that would bring about what is just a non-binding plebiscite in their province, not something that would be considered an official referendum. Though it would be a big public vote to be held and have, and it would be invoked by citizens. But they should tune up their legislation, because it's based on a percentage of all the people who are eligible to vote. That's what Alberta used to have. That's what's being changed with Bill 54 in Alberta. Because in Alberta it used to be 600,000, and now it's being brought down to a more reasonable 177,000 signatures on a petition, because it's 10% of those who got off their butts and voted. Good incentive for people to get up and vote then. So they should reform Saskatchewan's legislation. I don't know if Scott Moe has the will or interest in doing that, but I think that's one of the things they need to be law.
I don't think he will. I don't think he will, because he doesn't like, he knows he can't risk anything without his government losing a few seats and then ending up with an NDP government. So everything he's been doing, he's been forced to do at a slower rate, which I hope you, if you're a new subscriber, tune into the previous episodes. I've delved on this in much more detail. But yeah, I don't think Moe will go that far. He's pretty weak when it comes to, getting forceful on a lot of the things, whereas Daniel Smith has been moving it on it. And the craziest part is that Daniel Smith's numbers are going up because she's willing to take the fight, and because she's willing to stand up to the socialist idea and instead give her citizens democracy. And Moe just doesn't quite have that. Now we're going to move further on here, and like I said, if you want, you can watch the video in its entirety. I post everything in my description below. So this is some wild footage, and I've shown a few of these. These are rampant all across Canada. They're really bad in Ontario, and I've seen a few in Vancouver, but it seems to be our capital, Ottawa, that it's like this is a normal, everyday occurrence. Happens all the time. I'm gonna have to mute it because there's some music. Look how organized they are. They've got getaway cars. Stolen truck. They're in and out in no time. They knew where they were going. They knew what they were grabbing. They had the place cased out. And right in broad daylight. Welcome to your post-national state, people. This is just beyond sad what Canada has become. And it's just getting worse. And looking at the numbers, 870,000 immigrants in Canada since January 1st. We're set to break our previous immigration record. Yeah, there are people that voted Liberal again. That should tell the West something right there. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, please punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Check out the merch. Like I said, I will be releasing a whole pile of new stuff here because I've been working through some software. I got some pretty good compliments on the stuff I've already got out there. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna diversify a lot of it. I've had a lot of other people kind of putting input, and I'm just breaking down a lot of the scaling and how to actually get it all lined up in order to keep the gear classy and Canadian. So yeah. Anyways, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I've been your host, Alias the Guy. Stay informed.